Hi, Diane. Welcome to Keep What You Earn. So excited to have you.
Thank you so much. A thrill to be here.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and your area of expertise, because I know this is an area that is very specific, and I know our listeners are going to get a ton of value out of our discussion today.
Sure. I am what's called a franchise consultant. I've been doing this for 17 years. Prior to that, I worked as the director of marketing for a franchise. It was a packaging and shipping franchise. And I got into that really just to learn a new industry. I had been in advertising and marketing. My husband took a job out of state. I became the trailing spouse. I could have transferred with my company, but was ready to try something new. So I answered one ad in the paper and was hired. I had that marketing background. I have an MBA and had been a sales manager for 10 years, but I didn't know franchising. So I was able to learn it from the franchisor side, which was very helpful, and got to meet the franchisees and work with them. However, the franchise fell on hard times, as sometimes happens with businesses. And even though I was part of senior management, I was downsized, as happens to many of the people that I work with. And then they say, oh, maybe I should look at business ownership. Well, I looked at franchise consulting as an option, because when I'd worked for the franchise company, occasionally I would talk with people who were looking at that franchise. And sometimes I think, oh, they would be really good in this franchise. And other times I think, oh, I hope you have another option, because I don't know, you would be very good. And so now what I do when I work with people and I match them to businesses, and we work with a whole range of companies, I don't have to force a round peg into a square hole. And that's important and gratifying and all good things.
So you work a lot with franchising, obviously. And we always, I think when you say franchise, everyone's brain goes right to fast food, McDonald's, and the traditional franchises we learned about probably when we were in school and how it works. When we learned that word, I feel like we learned it in the context of McDonald's every single
Yes.
time. So can you tell our listeners a bit more about when you say franchise, how you define it and some other examples of how you can apply a franchise other than the restaurant business?
Sure. Well, a franchise really, when you become a franchisee or a franchise owner, you are paying a one-time franchise fee for the rights to use their system. They have developed, we might think in terms of McDonald's, that secret sauce
Mm-hmm.
that you are getting that access to, which includes the training, the support, everything with that. And certainly it's appropriate that we think of fast food, because there are so many companies in that space, and they all have the flashing signs by the side of the road. And McDonald's has minted more millionaires than anyone. However, there are many additional options, and you don't need $1 million to get into other options. So it could be something like a fitness studio, hair salon, a nail salon, a massage studio. It could be automotive aftermarket, your tires, your transmissions. It could be something related to education, tutoring. It could be senior care, where you're dispersing caregivers to a senior's home. There are also many service-based businesses that have done very well the past couple of years, because they've been deemed essential services. And those range from things like a handyman or residential cleaning. When we think of a home, we can start at the roof. So there are franchises for roofing, for gutters, for insulation, for irrigation, lawn care, pool care, pet care, flooring, window coverings, electrical, HVAC, so many in that space, emergency services for water, fire damage, IT, staffing. So there are many options. Just about any business that operates independently has been franchised or is in the process of being franchised.
Yeah. And I think it's so important to reframe what we think of as a franchise. And I think it's actually a great tool for business owners to use. And how would you describe, because I know that this is what you work with a lot. How would you describe the ideal candidate for a franchise? So someone who's looking to become a franchisee, what traits do they have to exhibit for you to see that potential and see that they would be a good match for this type of approach?
Sure. There are several traits that I do look for. One is, do they play well with others? Are they willing to take direction? Do they have that curious mind? Do they want to learn more? Do they want to have more, be it more freedom, more flexibility, more financial control, more money? Do they have that open mind that they could look at additional options? Do they have transferable skills, that they've been successful, that they are comfortable hiring people? Do they have a good work ethic? Are they good people? I like working with good, honest, hardworking, salt of the earth people. I think that's our bread and butter. And I think too many times people don't recognize that they have options and they could be in business for themselves, and probably might even enjoy it more.
Yeah. So what if our listeners are hearing that and going, gosh, that sounds like me? What are some of the biggest benefits or ways that they should consider franchising? If they have not previously opened their mind up to this option, why should they consider this? What are the biggest benefits to them?
Well, when I talk with people, and sometimes when I chat with people, I just say, wow, you've got an impressive background. Why don't you do it yourself? And they'll usually say, I thought of it, but how long is it going to take me to create everything? And I don't have that big idea. And I'm more of a person who likes to execute. So give me that playbook, give me that recipe, and let me go. So to me, that's the big benefit of a franchise, is that you've got a proven system and you can say, okay, I've got people who are training me and supporting me, and I don't have all the answers, but I've got the questions, and I've got this parent company that knows how to do things, and they're going to help me. It's just so much easier to get started. And many times people will come back from training and they'll say, oh, Diane, I can't imagine that I was thinking of doing this myself. Or they'll get their first to-do list as part of pre-training, and they'll go, oh, I'm so happy because I wouldn't have anticipated this, or I wouldn't have known about this. Or they say, digital advertising, how in the world do you keep up with that? And it's always changing. How could I do that and run a business? So that's why they like all the systems, the infrastructure, the support, and that it minimizes the risk. It doesn't eliminate the risk, but it minimizes it, because people have gone ahead, they've made the mistakes, they've learned, they've corrected, and they continue to fine tune.
Yeah, it feels like I'll say a lower risk way to start a business, in the sense that there's a cushion there of someone has put in the work to do a lot of the heavy lifting in terms of reputation and branding and other things like that, and advertising. Cause I know those of you listening are thinking, God, wouldn't it be great if I didn't have to do so many Facebook ads just to tell people I exist, and people knew where they could go to find X, Y, and Z. And I think that's part of the draw of the franchise for sure.
Exactly. And again, you're working with the people at corporate, but you also are talking to your fellow franchisees. And you're saying, so I'm in this part of the country, you're in that part of the country, but our markets are similar. What are you seeing? What works for you? And you have more data points, you have more info. And again, you can fine tune and hone that, be more
Agree.
productive.
Agree. And what are the risks associated with franchising? So why would someone stray away from something like that? I guess, what are the honest risks that someone encounters? Because this sounds great, but there's got to be, it's not all rainbows and unicorns. We know that there are some risks involved. So explain sort of what that comes with.
Sure. Well, there is a fee. There is a one-time franchise fee that people pay when they sign agreements to get started. And then there's an ongoing royalty. Usually it's a percentage. And there should be value for that, so that you're saying, okay, I'm paying this, but if I had to create all these things or keep up with them or develop new programs, this would be a much less expensive way to do it. So if there isn't value there, that could be a problem. If someone isn't comfortable, if they're that real Renaissance person and they're good at a lot of things and they're very creative and they want to do everything their way, they might feel constrained and that might not be a good fit. Or if they have to have that guaranteed paycheck every 2 weeks, they're not going to have that. So that could be too stressful. And I would not encourage anyone in that category to get into a franchise either. So if we think of a spectrum from 1 to 10, with 1 being the person who needs a guaranteed paycheck and 10 being that person very creative, wants to do everything on their own, the people that are usually good are in that 3 to 7 range, that are successful and and comfortable.
So what can someone expect if they're interested in investing in a franchise, starting a franchise, becoming a franchisee, the proper term?
Yeah.
um, what would they expect in terms of the startup phase, in terms of timeline and potentially costs? I know you mentioned the one-time fee. That I think a lot of the fees really come up front, which is part of the risk too, is, investing up front and investing in yourself to grow it. But also, what can they expect for time commitment on the ongoing basis in maintaining it? Um, time commitment up front, time commitment maintaining, what will this take for someone to implement?
Sure. And that's a very good question. There are a couple answers to that. So in the franchise world, there are franchises where you're going to be involved full time, and that's the majority of them. And that's, as it sounds, a full-time commitment, and certainly more getting started, because anytime you do something for the first time, it takes longer, even though you go through training. When I worked for the packaging and shipping franchise, we would always say, okay, we've got 10 people in training. One person's going to do it wrong, even though we went through and we showed it. So that's simply part of that learning curve. But if we look at getting started, companies will have, so we have companies that are full-time commitments, and then we have others that are called manager run, where people keep their existing job and build a business through a manager. In that scenario, they're usually looking for a commitment of 10 to 15 hours a week on an ongoing basis. Certainly more to get started, and sometimes less as it goes, as the business has been around for a longer period of time. As far as getting started, if we look at a service-based business, so let's just take a senior care franchise where you're operating out of an office suite, you're hiring caregivers to go to people's homes to take care of seniors and other people that need assistance. You could do your franchise investigation, sign agreements, go to training, which is usually 2 weeks, and come back and be in business. So it can be a relatively short period of time. If we're looking for something that is location-based, you would sign franchise agreements, you would start engaging with the real estate department and start looking for locations. And most franchise companies and the real estate departments will help you with that. They'll assist with negotiating the lease. Usually they'll want you to plan accordingly, and it might take 6 to 12 months, 6 to 9 months in there, depending upon the location and the importance of it and the term to negotiate. And then they'll go through and they'll talk about how long it takes to do the build out after that. But usually it's better if we anticipate on that longer side, and then we're pleasantly surprised. So one of the advantages now is there are more locations available, more better locations available, but it's still, even with that, it still takes some time.
Yeah, and I love that. What I didn't realize is how involved the franchisor gets with the process too. It's not like you're on your own. You have them to help you as well with the location and other items like that. So on that note, what do you think are some of the best ways to pick a franchise for you? So let's say if you're interested in becoming a franchisee, and then the next step is, well, what do I want to open? What do I think is the best option for me? what is the process that they can go through to help them identify that?
Sure. And that's where hopefully I would help, looking at their skills and their goals. What do they want to accomplish? So sometimes when I work with people, they say, I want to have a business where I can have a lifestyle. I want to be able to coach my kids in Little League, or I want to be able to work with my spouse or partner, or I would like to be able to bring my kids into the business. I'd like to leave a legacy to them. Other times people will say, I'm in prime earning capacity and I want to make a lot of money. Or I want to be that empire builder and I want to start with a couple units or locations or territories. And I'm the person who wants to get to the 100 mark. So I'm going to make different recommendations depending upon what they tell me so that it matches them and their goals. Some people are very good at managing people. Let's say they are energized by managing young people. And so we might look at businesses where the employees are younger and someone else says, no, that would drive me crazy. I prefer to work with people who are older. So we might look at businesses that employees are mainly a little bit older, or some industries, let's say automotive, employees tend to be more men, or some industries, employees tend to be more women. So I'll ask if there are any preferences and plan accordingly. So it's based off of the person, not so much what their area needs or what's hot right now, but what are they going to be successful in? What are they going to be happy in? And what's going to
Yeah.
meet their goals? Because a franchise is really a vehicle to get them to that goal.
Yeah. And it's what I think most people assume is that it has to be in an area where you're already an expert. For example, I don't know the first thing about running a spa, but I know that probably from talking to you, I'm going, I could be a spa owner technically. It's not about your technical skill set in the subject matter of the business necessarily. It's really about how you prefer to work. And that's why I really enjoy that approach.
It's so different because we're not looking for the person to be the technician. There are some franchises where that may be the case, but the majority of them are what we call an executive model. So you've got that exec, and let's just take residential cleaning. So the person who buys a cleaning franchise, the sexy and exciting business of cleaning homes or offices, they don't ever clean. They are hiring crews to clean. So people look at that and they leave their corner office, their white collar position, because they like the business model and they say, I can hire people, I can train them. It's a Monday through Friday business, no nights, no holidays, no weekends. If my crew does a good job and they clean Mrs. Smith's house this week and she wants it cleaned every 2 weeks, and we can do this, I've got recurring revenue. When it comes time to sell that business, it's going to sell for a higher premium because we've been doing all these customers' homes every 2 weeks for years. And that's a pretty nice revenue stream. So they look at it and they say, gee, we've got good cash flow. We don't have inventory. When you look at it from that perspective, you go, maybe I would like to look at something like that. Maybe I wouldn't. I don't know. But we want to look at it from that owner's perspective in addition to the consumer's perspective. So it just opens it up. Or the spa example, they are never looking for the person that owns a massage studio, a massage envy, for example, to be the person giving the massage or working the front desk. They're hiring people to do that and they're managing it. And most of the time, people that own those usually start with three units. They open up one, then the second, then the third, and sometimes they continue to grow and become that empire builder. So they are familiar with it, and maybe to take it to one extreme, if we think of McDonald's or fast food, the franchise owner may know how to flip the burgers and they may know how to work the drive-through, but that's not going to be their primary job.
Right. And so full disclosure, and those of you who listened to our first episode know this about me. I worked at a McDonald's for 6 years. It's where I learned all business operations and manuals and skills, and where I came to expect a certain amount of structure in a business. And it's really funny because I go back to the owner of that store would show up. He was an owner operator, and he would show up once a week around lunchtime and make soda for fun, like pour the drinks. And that's about all he knew how to do. He didn't know how to work the headset. He didn't know how to do anything in the grill. And we would laugh because he would show up in like nice khakis and a shirt and greet the customers, but he would not be rolling up his sleeves and grabbing a bag and, getting dirty.
And in
So
fact, I listened to your first episode, and
yeah,
if I recall, that was your first job when you were 14.
yes.
And if I recall, at 16, you're in management already, right?
Yeah, they move quickly. I think I was, now I'm looking back and going, that was a horrible decision. But I was at 17 or 18, I was closing at 1 a.m. by myself in the dark in the middle of a busy street with another person. And I'm going, who let the teenage girl do this? But yes, I was managing and in charge of training and cash management at roughly 18, 19 years old. So I learned a lot. And I can tell you to this day, and this is the coolest thing too, when you own a franchise, and I think this is a byproduct, is you're also creating jobs and you're creating that structure for other people, because I grew up with that. And because of that, I know the exact temperature burgers need to be at. I know the exact temperature things need to be stored at, the shelf life of all our product. And I know how to make the apple pies. So, and I know why the shake machine always breaks. So it's really funny because you realize you understand the operations and the process. When you're a shift manager, for example, at a McDonald's, there is a very specific process defined down to how to spend all of your time and in what order to do things to monitor to ensure success. So it's also who to put in what positions at lunchtime. They call it aces in their places. I remember that from when I was 14. So there's a lot of these methods that you can actually take away from a franchise, and these structures and manuals and acronyms and all these things, the framework. And you can take that and you can actually apply it to a lot of different things, not just the literal franchise it came from, but you can learn a lot from taking from someone else's playbook.
Exactly. And it's so funny that you talk about that, because it's so applicable. So again, sometimes when I'm talking with people, what they say is, I want to be involved in the community. I want to be that good employer. I want to be the employer of preference. And I want to hire people, and I want to give them opportunity, and I want to launch them in a business. And that's a very rewarding, fulfilling reason for wanting to do a business. It's exciting.
It is. It is. And there's also, if you're nervous about hiring and managing people, there also was, I remember this from McDonald's, there was a whole handbook on how to do everything with your people. So how to train, how to communicate well in that space, how to approach your managers, how to schedule people, how to ask for time off, how to do all these things. So you had that recipe to go off of. So you didn't have to feel like you were going it alone and making a ton of mistakes left and right, where you felt like you were saying the wrong thing all the time. There were guidelines. And a lot of folks can see that as stifling to say, oh, that they dictate how we do everything. But if you're someone who just loves having that framework and coloring within those lines, then it's a really good fit. I think there's a really good balance there of having the autonomy to build your business and build its reputation while also following a recipe that works.
Right. And you're the person who's hiring the people and providing the training and setting the culture, setting that framework within. So again, when I work with people, sometimes people want to have a bigger voice in a business, and they might enjoy an emerging franchise where they can have a little more influence. And then other times people say, no, I want that framework and I want everything buttoned down. And so these are questions that we'll talk about and we'll discuss to make sure that it's a match there and that they're comfortable.
Yeah. What would you say are the biggest success factors for a franchisee in terms of, I know we talked about the traits of a good franchisee, but what do you think ensures success once they actually take on the franchise? What are the biggest ways that they can maximize their success once they're already in the mix?
It's probably just as with any other business, it's that fine tuning. It's looking at metrics. It's making sure you've got the people in the right places, making sure that your advertising and marketing is working. Just, I think, all of the basics. Sometimes in the corporate world, we hear of people, wanting to hit that corner office. Well, in a franchise, you look at success, and the nice thing is we can each have a franchise and we can each be successful. Your success doesn't mean that I can't also be successful. We can both be successful and we can both help each other. So there's a lot of sharing of ideas. There's a lot of camaraderie. There's a lot of cooperation. So I think you look at those best practices and you say, what are some of the top people doing and how are they doing that? Some of those little nuances, so you can tweak things a little bit more and continue to improve and hone.
Yeah. And what's really great is, I know we were talking a bit before we hit record about your services, and I think it's really interesting. Can you tell our audience here about what services you offer to help them if they're interested after hearing all of this? And you're kind of selling me on it too, I'll be honest, about, opening up a franchise. They say, this sounds like me. I really want to explore this and learn more. Tell us what you offer and how folks can get in touch with you.
Sure. I really facilitate a process, and it works well because franchising is very process oriented. So we start with an online questionnaire. It's 4 pages. It takes about 15 to 20 minutes. It separates the people who take action from those who don't. And after that's completed, then we schedule a consultation call, and that's a longer call. That's usually about an hour and a half to 2 hours, where I ask a ton of questions because I want to get to know about you and your perspective, your background, and where you're going and where you've been successful, and just a lot of different things. After that, I write that information up on what we call your franchise business model, and that's what I use to look for companies that would be both viable and available in the market we're looking at. And then I'll make those introductions and ask you to keep an open mind, because some will probably go, oh, that makes perfect sense for me. And others are going to go, where did she come up with this? I never heard of this company. I don't know that industry. And we'll take a look at it. And the knee-jerk reaction is to go, no, but there are usually some industries or things that are pretty exciting. So we'll take a look at that, and then I'll coach and guide the person through the process. They'll be talking directly with the franchise companies. I like to introduce 3 companies so you can compare and contrast. That's a manageable amount, and people think it doesn't sound like a lot, but once you start getting into things, there's a lot to investigate. And then we'll narrow it down. They'll learn about the franchise companies, training, their support, their digital advertising, their territory, their structure, their vendors, everything like that. Then they'll have the opportunity to talk to owners, and they'll get to ask the owners. So I heard all about the training. So tell me how you feel about the training, and you hear it directly from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Then the last step is what we call a discovery day, or meet the team day, or a confirmation day. And that's usually you're invited to the home office to meet the whole management team, get any last minute questions answered, and then you make a decision, yes or no. So up until this whole time, you're learning, you're evaluating, you're asking questions, you're kind of trying it on. And franchising is pretty transparent if you'll but take the time and ask the questions. And that's the process, and that's what I coach and guide people through.
And just tell our listeners, how much does that cost them to go through that process with you?
So this is actually a pretty sweet deal, because our services are free. We are paid by the franchise companies for the coaching, the pre-screening, the matching, the education that we do. So there is no strings attached. Basically, franchise companies, if they pass the franchise pre-screening process, are usually thrilled to work with people that we recommend that would be a good fit for them, because they're all looking for that great candidate, they many times will have protected territory and they want to award that territory to the best person possible. And if we can provide that best person, that's what they're looking for. So it really becomes a marketing fee, if you will. They might have been advertising on a website or a trade show and didn't get the results they wanted. And again, if they pass that pre-screen process, they'll reallocate funds for that. So a franchise fee doesn't vary for a new franchise if someone works with me or not.
That's amazing. So really you got nothing to lose by exploring this, right?
For most people, they say, well, that's kind of a no-brainer. But also I think it's important for people that maybe a franchise isn't right for. I still welcome the opportunity to talk with them or chat with them, because nobody knows until you get into it. And all I ask is, if it isn't right, that we're candid and we're honest, but then keep me in mind. And when you talk to someone who is frustrated or wants to be a business owner, just make an introduction. And that's how
Absolutely.
I can keep my practice and my services free.
Absolutely. So for those of you listening, if you're frustrated with the upfront effort to start a business, maybe you want to apply some tried and true methods and you want to shift your focus into finding a recipe that's already out there and start cooking that up, definitely get in touch with Diane. What's the best way to get in touch with you for our listeners?
Sure. Probably the easiest is quickchatwithdiane.com. And that will get you to my Calendly page where you can schedule a short call. With a last name of Pleuss, which is Pleuss, it makes it a little difficult, but my website is Diane Pleuss, Diane, P as in Peter, Leuss as in Sam. You can also find me on LinkedIn, Diane Pleuss, the franchise fitter. I try to post a lot of articles there that are educational and helpful to give you background and also to give you a little insight into who I am and if you might like to work with me.
And for those of you listening, those will all be in the show notes for you. So you can go ahead and click all those links and not worry about spelling Diane's name. We will have that for you. So shifting gears a little bit to wrap things up with you, Diane, I love to ask all of my guests some 3 rapid fire questions circling around money, because here on Keep What You Earn, we are talking about how to earn more, keep more, most importantly, and to optimize your business. So I would love to ask you, what is one investment that you currently can't live without?
Well, I would have to say probably our technology, the computer, the phone. It allows us to host this conversation today, connect us to so many, particularly during these times. So anything related to technology is critical.
All right. What is one thing that you learned about money that turned out not to be true?
That one thing I learned about money that turned out not to be true. I wish I was better prepared for this question.
That's why they're rapid fire, Diane. That's why they're rapid fire.
Yes. Well, that I'm thinking everything that I learned, maybe that was my frugal parents and my frugal grandparents that I grew up with in a 3-generation household of work hard, save a lot. Maybe the one thing back then growing up, credit was frowned on. Yeah. And so we didn't use credit. We saved, and if we didn't have the money, we didn't buy it. So that was the philosophy that I grew up with that I think has definitely changed.
I agree. And lastly, what makes you feel like a millionaire?
I feel like a millionaire when the people I work with are happy and successful, and there's always challenges, but they say, I've got a certain amount of control and life is good. I like where I'm going. I like what I'm doing. There's a satisfaction and a contentment that comes with that. That's rewarding and invigorating.
Love that. And if you agree, then like we were talking about earlier, it's a great option to be able to start a business and to be able to empower other folks like that. So I think that's great. Now, I want to thank you so much for jumping on the show today and sharing all of your wisdom around franchises. I think it's a subject that, frankly, we don't hear about enough and we don't explore as business owners. We all dive right into entrepreneurship, and there is no shame in using someone else's program, someone else's recipe or formula, especially if you haven't been exposed to one before and learned from that, because there's a lot to be said about being able to plug in a system that works, ensuring some success, and then going off on your own and applying it in a different way. So I really encourage you guys to explore Diane's options here and have a chat with her.
Thank you so much. And everything you said, it was so well said and absolutely spot on. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I'll see you guys next episode.